Take off from that. Then, or keep it on. This must go in there, but log it back. Just minimize that one and open the list.
Uplighting the logo. And it's going to generate a lot of heat behind us.
Yeah.
Media briefing.
Should I put it on screen? Should I put it on screen?
If I want it on the screen, how do I?
We can launch it. I can minimize it. I can minimize it and then open the see use one, and then when you come in, we launch your one.
No, C's one is here already.
Yeah.
So you don't have to open anything. So
It's just swapping between the two.
okay, lock the thing on and minimize both. No, you don't have time.
So which one should I put on screen?
Just outlet.
Okay, cool.
And hang it out.
Okay, cool.
Waiting for the Eskom CEO. We thought your lights had gone off. Members of the media, thank you very much for attending this briefing. My name is Adrian Lakay from the Ministry of Public Enterprises. And thank you for attending on short notice. The idea here is for the panel to address you and to be as open and frank as possible about the problems Eskom is facing and the electricity supply constraints that the country is dealing with. That's as much as I will say. The panel I'll introduce to you, on my far side, Mr. Jan Oberholzer, he's the COO, Chief Operating Officer of Eskom. Next to him, the CEO, Mr. Pakamane Khadebe. Then Minister Pravin Gordhan, Minister of Public Enterprises. And then closest to me, the Chairman of Eskom of the board, Mr. Jabu Mabuza. We also have in the audience members of the technical review team that was recently appointed to help both the ministry and the board in giving an independent assessment of what things look like at power station level, amongst other issues. I must caution that we are constrained for time. The minister will leave you in exactly an hour, so let's try and get through the proceedings as quickly as we can. Thank you again. I'll hand over to Minister Gordhan to address you.
What's up? Have you sorted out your competition yet?
Guys, can we please...
The commentator. Gentlemen, let's behave ourselves. If you need mediation facilities, they're available. Well, good morning to you, ladies and gentlemen, and to the public that are watching all of us this morning. We are here because we want to very frankly share with South Africans what exactly is the energy situation in the country. What are some of the challenges that we are confronted with? How are we dealing with these challenges? But more importantly, to say to South Africans that this is a difficult time. It is a time when I know that many people are frustrated because of the uncertainty around what is actually happening. And the kind of disruption that happens both in the business world but also in various households as a result of the load shedding that is going on in the country in the current period. We fully understand that frustration. We want to apologize for the additional burden that we're placing on our people in South Africa at this point in time, and to the businesses, small and big, which are working under very difficult circumstances in this current economic climate. But at the same time, I want to appeal to all of us to try to understand the nature of the challenges that we have. As I said, where do those challenges actually come from? And assure you that the Eskom staff in particular, and the management and board, together with other government departments and government as a whole, are doing the best they can under very difficult circumstances. And you'll understand the difficulties that we are confronted with when we go through some of the details of what we have to actually share with you at this point in time. The message a special message to the Eskom staff as well, who particularly at a power station level and at the various other plants that supply energy on and off, whether it's the diesel plants or the dams, those who've been managing the transmission line from Cahora Bassa in Mozambique to South Africa. Both of those lines have collapsed as a result of the cyclone that swept through Mozambique and Zimbabwe. And I'm sure all of you will join us in conveying our condolences to the people of Mozambique and Zimbabwe on what seems to be a significant loss of life, and the numbers at this point that are not even available. In respect of the last matter, to show you the kind of urgency with which the President and others are dealing with this crisis, over the last 2 days, a special crew from the SANDF and combined with Eskom technicians have been flying over the parts of Mozambique where the pylons are, which carry the transmission lines between the hydropower dam and the plants in South Africa. And we'll give you a report on the status of those lines, the status of the pylons that actually hold up those lines, and further visits are planned in the next day or two by these teams in order to establish the level of damage, but also the extent to which they can be repaired sooner rather than later. So let me repeat. We understand the frustration. We don't have a magic formula. This is not about whether Pravin Gordhan or Jabu Mabuza or Pagamani Hadebe single-handedly have a magic wand that can actually enable us to wave that wand and say load shedding is over. It's going to be a huge struggle ahead of us to actually overcome this crisis. But what we want to do this morning is to give the public as much information as we can and have at our command, so that all of us have very similar pieces of information. For example, how much of energy is actually installed in South Africa? 48,000 megawatts. So if 48,000 megawatts has been installed in South Africa, why do we have only 28,000 megawatts available on the average day? What's the gap between 48 and 28? It's 20,000. Where does that 20,000 megawatts of energy actually disappear? And we will show you some illustrations to answer that particular question. Secondly, when that 20,000 megawatts disappears, inverted commas, what happens to the power supply system? And why do we engage as Eskom in load shedding, and the consequences of load shedding that actually follow? Thirdly, what caused this problem? There's a lot of history to it. Eskom is a very old organization, so there's some historical elements. There's some very recent history that Eskom has been through during the state capture period, which many would like to deny, but it's a reality. We confront it every single day. And then there's the current period in which we have crises at the power plants, which results in the load shedding that we actually have. So what is the cause? We will explain to you in very simple but direct terms as to what we think the cause of the problems are and what are the solutions that we are trying to work on, because that's the most important thing. I know the most important issue for South Africans at the moment is how long will this last, and when are you able to give us certainty that load shedding will end? And all I want to do right up front, before anybody asks the question later, is to say that at this point in time, we still are getting a better grasp of the technical problems and other problems that Eskom power stations are confronting. And that is why you've had the presidential Eskom task team created by the President in January, which presented one report. You've had the Eskom Board and management developing a turnaround plan and a 9-point generation plan as well. And right now, we have, on a voluntary basis, 12 or 14 engineers that are visiting the plants, the power stations themselves, to give us another independent view of what's going wrong and how quickly can we repair what is going wrong at the power stations themselves. So that demonstrates to you our eagerness and determination to get to the bottom of what the problems are, but more importantly, be able to communicate to South Africans an answer to the question, how long will load shedding last? So the direct answer to that question is that we need to complete these investigations. And that we will come back to you in the next 10 to 14 days in a similar form, and equally frankly tell you where do we stand on the particular challenges we have. But more importantly, in order to ensure that we lighten the burden on South African businesses, but South Africans generally, wherever they might be in our country, we want to work more closely with municipalities and households and businesses as well to orchestrate the schedules of load shedding in a way in which we cause the least amount of disruption and damage. So at the moment, we might not be doing that in the right kind of way. We've started talking to different constituencies amongst the public, and once we have a better understanding in the next day or two, we want to see how all of us can work together in order to solve this problem. My last general message is that this is not about us pointing fingers at anybody. Today, we are confronted, as many times in South Africa we have, with a crisis. We've had load shedding before. We've taken steps as South Africans to manage load shedding on the demand side, not just on the supply side. In other words, how do we use electricity? You know how we introduced LED lighting or energy-saving lighting. We asked people to switch geysers off, switch off swimming pool pumps, and so on and so on. Well, we've got to go back to work as one South African team so that we save as much energy as we can on the one side, and on the other side, we ensure that we can produce as much energy as we can, notwithstanding the constraints that we currently have. And we can assure you that all of the constituencies on our side, government, the board, the management, and the staff at Eskom are doing the best that they can. And we again give you the guarantee that we will communicate better, because we have not communicated adequately with the South African public. But now that we have a better grasp of what is going on, and in 10 days hopefully a much better grasp as well, we assure you that we will communicate frankly on the one hand and more regularly on the other hand, so that you just don't get the alert which says load shedding tomorrow morning or load shedding tonight. We need to say more than just that to South Africans in order to explain ourselves better, and also as public officials account better to the South African public as well. So, where are we as we stand today? We're going to show you some slides. That slide there that you have is on what they call power availability. I think I don't want to, where's Bernard? Right. I don't want to get paid for his job. So let him explain to you what that means, so that all of us have an understanding to the first issue I raised. We have 48,000 megawatts installed in South Africa. what happens to that 48,000? Bernard is the what his official title is, the systems operator. He'll tell you what he does.
Good morning. My role is to balance supply and demand. We do this real time, and so we look at the demand for energy in the country. We schedule generation to meet that demand. If there's not enough generation, that's when we implement load shedding, which is the reason we are here today. So what you're looking at on the screen is the total installed capacity of Eskom. I'll use the mouse here. So the red line at the top is the total installed capacity. It does go up. That means there's more units coming into commercial operation. It might be a 1 unit or 2 units from Medupi or Oq'silly. That's why it jumps there. Below that, that whole light pink area, it's breakdowns. The capacity that's out of the system because of generation failures. So you'll see on the screen, there is some allowance which is made. Normally in summer, we make that 8,000 megawatts of breakdowns. In winter, it goes to 7,500. The reason for that, we do more maintenance in summer and less maintenance in winter. And secondly, our generators perform much better in cold weather conditions in winter. So the allowance for breakdown drops in winters. And then the green space is the planned maintenance. Unfortunately, you don't see the winter, which starts beyond March. So in March, that space drops. So there's less planned maintenance that happens in March. Below that, the yellow is my operating reserve. So it's kind of a spare wheel. When I run the system, I need some capacity to cater for disturbances on the system. The sudden loss of a generator. Then I utilize this yellow space, which is about 2,000 megawatts, to bring the system back into balance. I'm sure you're aware that the challenge right now is that we don't have economical storage facilities, meaning we have to supply demand real time. So as soon as there's demand, we have to increase generation on the other side. So that's where the reserves help me for that immediate need for increase. The pink, that pink over there, which is written diesel, this is the open cycle gas turbines. This is the diesel operated generators. We've got about 3,000 megawatts of them, 2,000 belonging to Eskom and 1,000 owned by the IPPs. So that we use under normal circumstances for emergency conditions, like to manage our peaks. South African demand profile, we have a morning peak and we also have an evening peak. During the day, the load drops a little bit. So that's when we utilize the diesel. So what is left in the blue is the capacity that's available to meet the demand. Ideally, you'll want your demand to be met by that blue space, meaning you're not running your diesel, you have enough coal and nuclear and hydro stations to meet the demand. The black line that you see there is the demand for that period, which started in November all the way to March. So what you see is that except for the mid-December to mid-Jan, we've actually been operating with a lot of diesel being utilized to meet the demand. So this is not ideal, and I think the minister has touched on it. And you can see even going forward, our plan was still to utilize a little bit of diesel until end of March. I will show the slide that goes beyond the current calendar year in the next presentation. But what is important here is when we load shed, it means that breakdown space has increased so much that it pushes everything else down. You end up eating through the reserves, which I don't like to do because that is to manage the risk on the system. And then you might even eat on the planned maintenance, which we don't like doing as well. So what we're left with, you use all your diesel and then you end up load shedding to meet the demand. Minister, I think.
Stand by.
Power
power stations.
Just stand by. I'll get it up.
All right, while we're waiting, what's going to follow is the way in which the power stations are monitored. So each power station can have anything between 3 units and 10 units. Endrina is the biggest, it's got 10 units. On the average, they have about 6 units. So when we say that there's been a power trip, that's not the traveling trip now, a power trip where something has gone off. What we mean is that 1 or more units in a power station have gone out of operation. And then we'll explain to you what a boiler looks like, right, inside. And so that all of you and the public understand how is coal power generated. And then we'll explain to you where things go wrong. Where do these so-called accidents actually happen? Where do the breakdowns actually happen? So that all of us have a common base of understanding about how these things actually work. So here are the power stations, and Bernard will take you through just a couple of them to give you an illustration of what's going on.
Okay. So what you see, each of the blocks with the same colors, it's a power station. The minister mentioned that you get the smallest with 3 units, and some you do get up to 10 units per power station. So each bar here represents how many units are operating. So for example, this power station A, it's got 6 units. 5 of them are operating. None of them are operating at full capacity, which is what we call the partial load losses. Over and above that, you've got 1 unit that is completely shut down, which could be due to a breakdown or due to a planned maintenance. So if you look at the whole picture, you can see there are a number of stations. This is taken real time last night. There are a number of stations where, 1, you don't have all units in operation, meaning there are no bars, and some where you have units operating beyond their maximum rated capacity. If I can just use this to explain my job as well, where you see demand versus shortfall during the peak. So at that point, at 1800, we had a shortfall of 7,700 megawatts. And that's why we ended up with stage 4 load shedding yesterday. To supplement for that, we had to utilize stage 4 load shedding, which gave us about 4,900 megawatts. And for the rest, we had to utilize the diesel to meet the remainder of that demand. So that's basically some of the power stations that are Eskom owned, and you can see Kohara Basa there, sitting at 0. Normally that should give us 1160 megawatts. I'm sure you've heard that we've lost both lines importing power from Mozambique to South Africa. So that's why that is sitting at 0.
Okay. So I hope you digested that one. The next slide will show you the age of our power plants. So we've been saying to you that many of the power plants that we have, the coal-powered plants, are old. Some as old as 40, 50 years old. Average is 37 years of age. Most power plants get retired between 30 and 40 years. But also, historically, they've been driven hard. So the taxi driver next to me will say that if you drive the taxi too fast, too hard for too long, then a particular set of refurbishments need to take place. But also, performance begins to become lower as well. So that's an illustration. Bernard, why don't you stay there? You are a film star for today. So those are the generating plants. And you can see the first one there is 55 years of age. Now, the issues that many people have concerns about, legitimately, is when you retire or start shutting down a power plant, what happens to workers, what happens to the coal mine that is adjoining it, what happens to the community that adjoins both the coal mine and the power station as well. So those are all the issues of the just transition that both the stakeholders in this industry and ourselves need to work together on. You want to illustrate anything in particular there? Jan, yourself or Bernard? You covered. They got it. Adrian? What else have you got there?
The picture of...
Right, so now you can go and explain. So this is...
So for your record purposes,
What
Bernard
about-
Magoro is the General Manager for Systems Operations, and this is Mr. Jan Oberholzer, the COO.
Through you, Minister, maybe one thing that we should highlight is that as you are beginning to see the aging of the power stations, roughly at about 37 years, but if you are looking at the maintenance that has been undertaken in the past 10 years, has deteriorated. So you have a risk where you have an increase in power stations on the other side, whereas on the other side, the maintenance has been decreasing. About 10 years back, the maintenance was roughly about 37 billion or so. That has since decreased to about 10 billion. In dealing with the current challenges that we're facing, we're putting another 7 billion in making sure that we maintain. Hence the challenges that we are currently facing. Sorry.
Thank you, Chair. Minister, I think what I'd like to demonstrate here is a boiler. Typically within each and every in each and every generating unit, you get a boiler. So this is where you get the water inside that is heated up and you get steam. And that superheated steam then went through your turbines and that generate the electricity. Now within a boiler there are hundreds, not hundreds, but many kilometers of tubes, boiler tube within the boiler. And what we're finding lately is that we have a lot of tube leaks. And now you can appreciate that wherever you find this tube leak, that means you first of all have to shut down your unit. The unit needs to cool down for anybody to get into that boiler, and then to locate, the location of where the boiler tube leak is. Then sometimes it's so confined the space that you have to cut some of the tubes to get to the space where you actually need to fix it. And currently what we're finding is quite a lot of units we're losing because of boiler tube leaks. As I'm standing here, currently we have 7 units that is out, that we've lost because of tube leaks. And usually it takes a few days, to fix it and then to bring it back. This morning at 9 o'clock we took another unit off, but I believe the good news is within the next few days these 8 units will be coming back. But this is biting us big time at this point in time, boiler tube leaks.
Explain where those tubes are and what do they do. We're all going to be partial engineers by the time we leave.
The tubes are basically within the boiler. Sometimes it's hanging 80 meters, 100 meters. So it's a lot of tubes inside this boiler. And you have a condenser, you have a superheater, so it's different sort of boilers that's heating, the water to a different level of steam in order to take it through your turbines. So it can happen anywhere within this boiler. As I say, hanging sometimes 100 meters in the air. 600, there you are. Up to 600 kilometers of tubes within one boiler. So I don't know if we're going to play.
That's the trip between Durban and Johannesburg,
Yeah.
as a Durban boy.
I don't know
So
if we can.
imagine a tube running all along the N3. That's the amount of tubes that you've got in each boiler, in each unit.
Jan, I think the main thing here, which I think would be important for this gathering, is not that once you pick up a tube leak, it gets fixed immediately. You put your people to put it in. You will have to wait for this thing to cool off, taking time and you bringing people then to deal with that, which might take just a bit
No,
longer.
absolutely.
Yeah.
We have a video which can be made available afterwards that explains in detail, it's 11 minutes, that takes you through all the steps of how the boiler looks and where you get some boiler tube leaks, what causes these boiler tube leaks, and what the damage can be when you get a boiler tube leak. So I think it is available afterwards.
All right, Mr. Mabuza is now going to add to what you said so far.
Yeah, Minister, thank you. Good morning. Minister, I think you have in the overview covered in very, very detailed terms where we at and how we got here. Maybe to just add a few comments that the Eskom problems as we see them, they structural, they operational, and they are financial. We have spent some time, and I think in trying to address what we called the cleaning up. But what is now has become clear is the cleaning up was a consequence of some malfeasance of people having stolen money. This was not money that was sitting in a vault somewhere at Eskom that they open the vault and take. It now becomes clear when you hear that the average life of the Eskom plant is 38 years. It's clear looking in the financials that for the last 5 years in particular, up to February 2018, there's been maintenance in a reduction sense. The maintenance spend was getting less and less, which is incongruent with the plant that was aging more and more. So it has to be that money that was not spent on maintenance. The question has to be, what was that money spent on? So that is an issue that is currently now being pursued through the law enforcement agencies, either on a criminal process or on civil processes. That is the one side. But the reality is we now have a plant that is falling off, owing to not maintenance. Eskom at a point took a decision that they will not be maintaining their old plant. They would spend money and building new plants, which was followed by the actual building of Medupi and Oq'silly and Ngula later. That decision, rightly or wrongly, was taken. The reality, though, is that the plants that were built have not come on stream fully, and the partial commercial availability of those plants has not been able to produce the required electricity. If you have take out 10,000 megawatts, you have to replace it with 10,000 new ones. The two new ones are not producing that. The one power station has got only one unit that has been commercially commissioned. The others, 2 or so units, but they all continuously are tripping. They're tripping because of a variety of reasons. We have found that some of the problems have to do with the design. But the design in itself cannot be a problem. It's what you do about fixing the design problems that you find in there. So we are in a situation that the Minister has explained to you the gap between the installed base and what is available, the 48 and the 28,000, and the demand. If the demand is met, then there is no need to load shed. But if there is more demand than there is supply, you need to find another way of dealing with this. But our current plants, the new ones are not producing the required capacity. The old ones are too old. We are now pushing them. There's only just so much that they can do. So where we now find ourselves, we do need time with the equipment. We do have to get time with the equipment. We've had these equipment that works when they are hot. You need to get them cold so that you can work on them. When you work on them, you've got to fire them up, test them when they are hot, see where the leaks are, take them off, make them cold, go and find those spares. These are old equipment. Go find those spares, go find the people, go pay the money that you need. So where we're at now is, as I see Eskom in two streams. What I would call the routine stream, that there is a particular process you need to follow to procure, there is a particular process you need to follow to get services, to get people. There is the crisis part of Eskom. The operational side is now the crisis level of Eskom. That crisis, I think, would need a crisis reaction methodology. Here we need time and speed. Here we need time to work with the equipment. We need speed to address the problems. We need speed to get the equipment, the spares. You need speed to get the people that you need to get. You need money to pay for the things that you need to get. The processes that are there as per the prescripts of our various governance are not geared up for the speed that is now required. You have not, for the last 5 years, routinely done maintenance. And anything that is mechanical, any moving part is subject to wear and tear. This equipment has worn, has torn. There is no other answer either than fixing it. And fix it, you need it to take it out of commission, and then you're gonna now reduce what is available. What is available is now the 28,000 megawatts. The demand is higher than that. To reduce what is available while you're fixing, to be able to bring back, hopefully in a sustainable and a reliable way, you need to, when you take that time to fix, you have got 4 options. The one option is you've got to import the capacity you don't have. You need to import electricity. We know why that option might not be feasible for our current situation. 2, the other option, you need to continue to ban this diesel on our open cycle turbines, which were never designed to be base. They were designed to be standby, to fill up as and when the need arises. But you now need to ban them. We have already seen a big increase on the amount of usage of our open cycle gas turbines, as it manifests by the amount of diesel we've been buying, to the extent that not only we can't afford it, but there is no more diesel available. So this, in terms of, just to contextualize the point, in terms of our regulator, we are allowed only 1% load factor of usage of these open cycle gas turbines. So in rand terms, that is, we are allowed to spend only 600 million a year on these. The last 3 to 5 months, given the various problems we've experienced, ranging from the early part of midway calendar 2018, we had those industrial relations issues, which has affected supply. Towards the end of last year, we had our coal supply problems. Recently, we've had the unavailability of plant, which meant that we should use this. In that period, we have spent just under 5 billion rand in spending what should have been 600 million. So we can go to NESA, but NESA can only allow us 1%. So there is a problem with the gap of how we're going to have to fund for this. But also going forward, you do know that, as I said in the options, you have to use those. So you are already having to budget and provide for a much bigger number, almost 6-7% load factor than the 1% that is allowable, which has got its issues about recoverability. The third option is, of course, to build new power stations. We don't have the time, we don't have the money, we have not yet, we're retiring our trainees already. The ones that we have put in that have not been fully commissioned are already requiring refurbishment. The last option, which is the last resort that the system operator has in his hands, and this is what Penat was trying to demonstrate, the last option is to load shed. It's not something that is taken lightly. It is indeed the last step that's get taken. We understand the inconvenience and the pain and the discomfort it costs South Africans, but we do hope that with the work that we've been doing, we would be able to reach a certain level of predictability. We would be able to come back and say to South Africans, we have 28,000, we need 36,000. How are we going to use this 28,000 whilst we are fixing the other 8 to meet our 36,000? How much will it take? How long? So that you South Africans can be able to plan your lives. But understand that this pain, this discomfort that we're going through is unfortunately one we need to do so that we can find the time with the equipment to fix it. I hope I've tried to explain why we have the problems we have. We have not maintained the plant over the last 5 years. We have seen our maintenance budget 6 years ago was in the 40s, 40 billion. We've seen it go to as low as half of that. And the more money you were running out of, must remember by July 20, up until July 2017, Eskom did not get any funding. So the little that they were finding would have been from what they were producing and selling. They were not producing optimally. What they were selling, they were not collecting, as it manifests with the high levels that we see in our municipalities. We've gotten tariffs. We've not been able to get cost-reflective tariffs. It is against this background that when the president decides that we should unbundle so that we can look at Eskom, look where efficiencies are, look at and find those efficiencies, find an acceptable benchmark cost, universally acceptable of producing electricity, and how we as an organization are performing relative to that. And then hopefully when we go to NESA, there's no more debate about what does it cost you versus what it would cost anybody else. And of course, whilst we're doing this, there are other challenges. The world has not been waiting for us to solve our problems. New technologies have come about. We need to gear up to be able to take advantage of those technologies. Whilst we're doing this, we have to follow a particular acceptable universal way of transition, a just transition from where we are. So some of the decisions we need to take or have taken need to be taken against the backdrop of what we need to be doing as a responsible corporate citizen. So we need time with the equipment. Speed is of essence. We need some indulgences on what we can to meet this crisis situation. We cannot use normal routine ways to address a crisis and an emergency situation. And we do hope that the work that is being done by the technical review team that is doing the audit, added to the work that we have done on our 9-point plan, we will be able in the next few days, Minister, to come back with more certainty and precision of how long will it take for us to do this, and then commit to periodically update South Africans on the various stages we had on achieving our set milestone. Thank you.
Mr. Morrison in the room. Has he left? Is he outside? If you can call him, please, for a moment. So let's sum up where we are. And Mr. Morrison is the co-convener of the technical review team, so we're going to give him 2 minutes to explain what they're doing so that you also know what they're doing. But if we round up now, what we're saying is you understand 48,000 as a number, you understand 28,000 as a number, you understand that there are these unplanned outages that create a huge problem for us at the moment. There is the maintenance issue, there's the age of the plants themselves. Some important maintenance work was not done a few years ago, notwithstanding what you might be reading on Twitter. Right? Notwithstanding what you might be reading on Twitter. The major refurbishments, the major car service, if you like, or what he would prefer to say taxi service, was not done during that period. And that has caused some of the problems. But we don't want to talk about the past. We have the issue as we have it today. We must find the solutions as quickly as possible and find the time and the money to get the maintenance done that is required to be done. Equally important, I think, which is a question that you're probably going to raise, is what impact that corruption have on Eskom? Because you've heard the evidence before the Zondo Commission over the past while, led by the chair as well. I think it impacted on the treasury functions within Eskom. It impacted on skills, good skills being marginalized, and good managers being marginalized or even kicked out of the organization. And other good professionals, black and white, have left the organization because they say, I don't want to work in this kind of environment, and are working elsewhere in the world today. The coal supply chain was contaminated. Optimum and Stroke Tegeta was one illustration of that, but there's lots of other issues where you should all ask questions about how does this coal supply chain, including the transport of coal, work, and how do you get rock and sand delivered sometimes to some of our power stations, which is a question. Then the maintenance issue, which Mr. Mabuza has gone through and others have gone through as well. The general procurement system, whether it's parts or whatever it is, there might be about 3,000 or more people in Eskom who have created business entities that are doing business with Eskom. Right? About 1,000 odd have been discovered already. Some have been dealt with. There's more to deal with. And that's the malfeasance that we want the majority of the staff, who are honest, hard-working people in Eskom, to begin to work on the right side and make sure that we get the malfeasance out of the system as much as we can. So those are some of the challenges that we have. We'll see where we can find Mr. Morrison, but in the meantime, Adrian, let's take some questions.
Thank you.
Could I talk about the 9.3?
There are many of you and one of me, so can we please be as organized as possible? Richard has a mic. Richard, stay there. Let's start at the back. We'll move our way forward on this section first. So, number one, behind you, Richard. No. Can we start at the back, please? That's number one. You will be number two. Number three, number four, and number five, sir. That's the first round.
Good morning, Aldrin St-Pierre here from ENCA. Three quick questions. The last time when I spoke to, and I know that some people may frown upon this, but the last time that I spoke to the former CEO of Eskom, Brian Molefe, he indicated that during his tenure, they ensured actually that the budget for maintenance does not decrease and is not compromised. And I wonder then where Mr. Mabuza then comes up and then says that actually what has happened over the past 6 years rather, is that the budget on maintenance has actually been compromised, because he said they used a system called Tetris, and I wonder whether Eskom still uses that system. Another issue, Minister, is that the last time that we had the crisis similar to this, you indicated that there is sabotage. We still don't know who may have sabotaged the system. Can you please tell us or give us an update on that? And do we have any updates as yet on the engineers that were supposed to come and assist Eskom as well?
Thank you. I don't think we've ever gone on record to say there's been sabotage, but I'll leave that to the Minister to respond to fully. Number two. Sorry? Afterwards, please.
So I know we said the Minister said that we're not going to talk about the past.
Sorry, can you identify yourself?
My name is Kirsten, I'm from Kegnet. I know the Minister said that we're not talking about the past, but we've known for a couple of years that there are problems going on here. Can you tell me what steps have been taken to address the maintenance issues in the past few years and the problems? Because it doesn't seem that much has happened.
Number three.
Hi, I'm from CCTV China. The situation is to look ahead. South Africans are aware of what they've been through with load shedding. But if we look ahead, your partners and your international investors are going to be asking, is there an energy reform program here? And do you have an investment into an energy solution? Because they're going to want to know what their futures will look like if they come in and invest in South Africa.
Thank you.
Antoinette Slavert from Rapport. I just want to find out how many units are shut down at the moment. I'm talking about the ones that need major refurbishment that were rather shut down rather than doing that. And is the plan to bring them back, or are you going to leave them in cold reserve or whatever you call it? And then I've heard some people in Eskom saying 80% of Eskom's problems are due to too low tariffs. Would you agree with that? And what are you, or is there anything to be done about the disconnect between the regulator awarding tariffs and Eskom? And then just lastly, Minister, you've said before that there's not, the communication is not good enough. We haven't seen any change. Is it going to change? Why would we believe you if nothing changes? We are so frustrated when crises like over the weekend happen and we just don't get answers.
Number 5.
Sorry, an additional here.
We'll charge you for this question.
Yes, you do. Obviously, the one that's going to come up about the future of energy reform and investment in energy solutions is going to come onto the table again, is going to be nuclear.
Number 5.
My name is Fred DeSam Lazaro. I'm with Public Television in the United States, and we're in the country doing a snapshot of South Africa at 25, and often hear the sentiment that this is symptomatic of a larger governance problem in this country. And the ratings agencies now say that this crisis is the biggest threat to South Africa's economy. I'm wondering, Minister, whether you might reflect and perhaps offer some reassurance, if there is one to be offered.
Thank you. Can we take that round first?
Okay. You want to respond, Jabu, to this maintenance budget issue?
Yes. Minister, this is not my opinion. Looking at the financial statements of Eskom, the maintenance spend over the last 5 years has been on a downward trend. The point I'm trying to emphasize, that should not be the case when you've got such an aging plant. The more your car gets old, the more you should spend to keep it on the road, albeit it can travel at lower speeds, until it comes to a time when it can't move at all, which is where we found ourselves. We also know, it's a matter of public record, that up until February 2018, the last cent ever got into Eskom was in July 2017. And maintenance needs money, maintenance needs people, and we see what they've spent. So we know what they've spent, we know what has not happened. So we don't know of the reduced spending that was in the books, how much of it, if all of it did go to maintenance, but clearly it was not adequate. So I'm not able, sorry, to talk about what the previous CEO said when he did say, I don't know what facts were. I'm saying this on the basis of facts of what was spent. And today those are audited financial statements. I hope they were not falsified.
No, Chair, I could just add on this. If you are looking at the spend,
or whether it was said at a shebeen, we don't know.
if you are looking at if you are looking at the spend on Eskom, starting from 2013-14, it starts from 32 billion, it goes to 30 billion, 27, 26. Then there's a blip, there's an increase in 2015-2016 of 27 billion. But that blip was primarily because when government recapitalized Eskom, it insisted that money should be spent on maintenance. Then it goes further down to 20 billion by the time we come here. So the truth of the matter is that spending on maintenance has decreased over time. The advantage that the previous management had that we don't have is that the systems could still continue even if you ban them to reg, to maximum. But now we don't have that privilege because they keep tripping. That's the reason the numbers are there. What we have tried to do is, even ourselves, because you benchmark your budget against the previous year. The first thing we did is we looked at the budget that we had a year before, which was 2017 and 2018. We put the budget at 19 billion, just less than 20 billion the previous year, because there was a lack of money. But within 3-4 years, we knew, 3-4 months, we knew that the challenges were coming. And we reviewed that, and we added another 5.5 billion spending on that to deal with that issue. But the truth of the matter, and whatever you look at, the maintenance has continuously been on the downward trend at Eskom.
So what we have found at one or two other state-owned entities is interesting, and there are clear patterns that state capture leaves behind, by the way. Change the minister, change the CEO, change the board. But the other pattern is move money towards capital expenditure. And that became the pool from which looting actually began to happen. You'll hear a lot more about it in the next few months in other entities as well. So the point that Mr. Mabuza makes about what was really spent on maintenance versus what was diverted elsewhere, there's still a lot of accountability, which I'm sure you're going to ask about in a moment, that needs to take place. I think the previous CEO and his colleagues of that time have a lot to explain to South Africa. A lot emerged during the parliamentary inquiry process. South Africans seem to, particularly the media, seems to forget that from time to time. There are a lot before the Zondo Commission now. So we also know that there is a fight back stroke pushback. So old narratives are being revived in the hope that they can become dominant narratives so people can stay out of jail, stay away from prosecution, and so on. But I'll come back to that point in a moment. On the sabotage question, there are many people who are speculating on this. I don't want to get into that right now. Once we're ready to tell you with concrete evidence what is going on or not going on, we'll talk about it. But there's no doubt that in the industrial strikes that we had in June, July, that Mr. Mabuza referred to, you had all sorts of things happening. Roads being shut down, so coal couldn't come in, oil couldn't come in, ash wouldn't be removed. Once you burn coal, you've got to remove the ash out, otherwise you clog the system. You can shut down a water pump very easily, and that can cause other problems as well. So these things have happened in the past. But let's come back to that. On the engineers who are going to assist, I thought I explained that we have the technical advisory team, all on a volunteer basis. And that happened, by the way, after we met the mining constituency at a CEO level. Then we met the engineering fraternity through the engineering council, and over 20-odd disciplines were represented at that meeting. And between the two constituencies, they made all sorts of recommendations to us on who would be willing and able to offer their services free of charge. And that team, unfortunately Mr. Morrison has left, but that team has deployed parts of that team to different power stations. And when we ask for another 10 days or 2 weeks, we're waiting for now the reports from that team as well, so that some assumptions can be verified or their report can come through clearly as well. Then the problem about how many units are shut down and what these problems have happened before. How have you followed them up? Which one of you wants to answer?
Minister, I can comment. It's Grootvlei, Kumati, and Indrina. A total of 11 units has been shut down at the end of its economic life. However, what's important, and then we plan to take the rest of the units at these 3 power stations. Also, we want to shut them down over the next 3 to 4 years. But this is based on the medium-term system outlook for 5 years. So we look what we believe is going to happen with a certain growth, and based on the information that we have and the way we believe our system will perform, we have decided then we can put them to sleep over the next 3 to 4 years. However, the way we perform at this point in time, we're in the process re-looking at the decisions that we have made and to put them to sleep. So we will reconsider as soon as we have the results.
Mr. Mabuza will address the communication question.
Yeah, Minister, there is no doubt either we have under-communicated, over-communicated, or wrongly communicated. But the point is we create more questions in answering a question. So we acknowledge that our communication could have been better. And starting with this very engagement, where we try to be as open, as transparent, as tactless as we possibly can, bearing in mind we're dealing with a key state, a key point on electricity supply. So we will continue from now to make sure that we communicate on time, we communicate as much as is required, and we ask in return an appreciation of some of the answers you may need to get. For us to give them, we need to get you to understand that they are for your understanding of the question, of the answer we're giving you, than for public consumption, given the security nature of these installations that we're dealing with. And for that, we do apologize. And also, whilst on this point, Minister, we're communicating with South Africans, but I think you did say it's important that there are still hard-working good men and women at Eskom. To them, we're going to engage them better, we're going to engage them more, because it is with them that all the things we say we're going to do, it's only through them that we can do these things. And we're grateful for them holding the line, but we also would urge them, recognizing that over the time, Eskom has not had a good industrial relations environment with its employees. Whether it's employee to employee, employee to management, we need to do better on that. Hopefully, in the interest of pursuing what is now a bigger public interest, would be able to set aside our minor differences. I don't need to like my colleagues, but I have to work with them.
Chair, there was a question asked by Kirsten on the current maintenance as to what we're doing. We have set aside 50 billion, runs over the next 5 years. That 50 billion is not only dealing with generations, because that's what we've been concentrating on, but we have taken a decision that if we don't deal with transmission and distribution, we'll be facing exactly the same challenges we are facing with distribution, with generation. So what we're going to do as we move forward is to ensure that both the distribution and generation are maintained, so that we don't maintain after they fault.
There was the question of energy, an energy reform plan. The way in which South Africa does this is through the integrated resource plan. Yeah. There's one in 2010, which crafted what the energy mix should be. There's a second one that is in preparation, steered by Minister Hadebe. Yes. And we can pretty soon look forward to the finalization of that process, and that will tell us what is the renewable energy element or percentage in it, what's the nuclear percentage in it, what's the coal percentage in it, etc. Part of that is hopefully going to be the new gas discoveries that we found. And there are people in this audience who would want me to say that there's also the LPG industry that has been neglected up to this point in time. That is a possible resource that could add value at this stage as well. So there is this trajectory that government follows in quite an organized way as we go forward. Our colleague from the US, well, welcome to South Africa. And I think we are a lot less noisy than the US at the moment. Have far less crises than the US at the moment. And fortunately, we don't govern through tweet as well. So if you don't mind me saying that. But let's get to the substance of your question. The substance is this part of a bigger governance crisis? We did have a governance crisis. That's what we call state capture. And that is being investigated at the moment through the Commission of Inquiry chaired by the Deputy Chief Justice Zondo. The present administration has been in office for about 13 to 14 months, or less actually. That's all we've had after the state capture period. During this time, we've got economic confidence going in this country. During this time, the President has convened various constituencies to look at the jobs environment, which is a serious problem in South Africa. Secondly, inviting investors into this country and creating the right climate for them, removing obstacles or uncertainties that would be traditionally discouraging investors to come into the country. So we had an investment conference last year when both South Africans and others committed a fairly substantial amount of money. There's another initiative from the private sector in South Africa called the Private Sector Growth Initiative. I attended one of those meetings, so there were 80 chief executives of companies in South Africa who, after a few months of work with the government minister and government generally, came up with a plan to invest something like 800 billion rands in 80 sectors of the economy. So these are all South Africans who are coming forward to say, on the economic side, we need to get things right. Secondly, in relation to corruption and the malfeasance that we've been talking about, the President initiated the Zondo Commission. We've had, part of the state capture damage was the damage to our institutions. So one thing the US does reasonably well is Justice Department works. In South Africa, we had a damaged prosecuting authority. We have a new head of prosecutions that has been appointed after a process was followed. Our revenue service was damaged as well. So some of the fiscal challenges that we face at this point in time are attributable to the economy, but they're also attributable to our ability to collect money. A new senior manager after an inquiry is going to be appointed by the Minister of Finance shortly there in order to start rebuilding the institution. Thirdly, we have what is called a special investigation unit that has special legislation to investigate malfeasance in our country. All sorts of forensic reports are now available, and they would be prosecutable where that is possible. The Minister of Police is attending to his investigating capabilities on his side as well. So in fact, you've come to South Africa at a point in time where we're recovering democratic governance. We are re-establishing the strength and reliability and the resilience of our institutions, notwithstanding the fact that some would like some of those institutions to remain as they were 2 or 3 years ago. And the current crisis is, and certainly one of the outcomes of the crises that we had in relation to state capture, but you've heard a number of explanations here which are partly historical, partly technical, as you saw in terms of the age of the power stations and so on. This is not symptomatic, if I can give you the more direct answer, of a governance crisis. Eskom, in an interesting way, is also one of the challenges that we face as South Africans, and we know that as government, as the board and management and the staff in Eskom, we'll get it right in the next year or two, but it'll take a bit of time.
Hang on.
Can we do that separately?
Yeah.
Yeah.
What I was explaining earlier about what we called trying to look at this business in its standalone sense, ring-fenced, have its own P&L, was in trying to advance the argument of a cost-reflective tariff, so that hopefully there would cease to be a debate about how much of this is stolen, how much of, we will at least reach a point that there is a universally acceptable benchmark of what it costs to its most granular way to produce an electron. we had hoped we would get there. It is our argument as Eskom that the tariff that we've been receiving from NESA has not been cost reflective. So we thought if we can find a settlement on what is cost, we can best argue for a cost reflective tariff. We have asked for 17, 15, and 15. We have been awarded certain tariff. If you add what we've awarded for the first year and the 4 or so and a half % from the last RCA, that should give us about 13%. We still believe for this year that is less. We've also, Minister, in looking at the announcement, the actual communication of how NESA has dealt with our tariff application, we have had more questions that have come out of that in how they have calculated the allowable revenue. I don't want to go into the details of that. Suffice to say, we've been back to NESA whilst we await their reasons for their decision, that we're asking a certain treatment on the allowable revenue that they have put in that does not seem, in our view, to be within the methodology of the YMPD. Neither has it got any precedence, because historically a similar situation was not treated the same way. But whilst I'm on the tariff point, Minister, the board has asked me at its last meeting that without taking sides on the debate, it is a bit inappropriate and disingenuous of the board to keep quiet about the issue of the IPPs. In the revenue determination of what is allowable, there are various aspects ranging from the capital base, the return on assets that you are allowed, the cost of your energy, your other operational costs, and also this particular tariff for this year. There's a 30 billion rand that is provided there for IPPs. So in as far as Eskom is concerned, what we buy on IPPs, we recoup from the tariff. We are neutral as Eskom as far as that is concerned. We do pass that through to the consumer. As a consumer, I can tell you how I feel about it. But as Eskom is a pass-through. If we spend more than 30 billion, we go through the RCA to recoup what we've spent. If we spend less than 30 billion for this current year, we'll have through the RCA to give back to NESA. So I just thought it's important that we have many problems at Eskom. We have many causes of our problems. Where we stand now, IPPs are not the cause of our problems. They are not the source of our problems. The fact that we buy, as it has been demonstrated, the OCGTs that we're using, about 1,500 megawatts we get from the IPPs. So I just wanted to address that point. The second point that was asked Minister was about, remember our STMPP story. Part of the other options that we need to look at is how we can go back to our short-term or medium-term power purchase programs from those in industry that have those, that we can buy whilst we're going through this difficult period. And also a point that was made, and I think it's worth making, is our supply, our demand side management focus. Thanks, Minister.
Thanks.
There was one question from our US colleague on ratings agencies that was attached to it. So we do everything possible in South Africa between the Treasury, government generally, and ourselves, and the various institutions to liaise closely with ratings agencies. Some of the S&P, I think, moved from negative to positive, although sub-investment recently. Secondly, we are still investment grade because Moody's hasn't pronounced on this particular issue yet, and we hope to stay there. And great care is taken in devising our fiscal framework through the Treasury to ensure that we do not risk our credit rating in any kind of way. So that's the general proposition, and I think it's about twice a year that various agencies in South Africa would interact with ratings agencies in one form or another. We also have both government generally and specific entities like Eskom, Transnet, etc., undertaking roadshows. During the course of those roadshows, they will also interact for their own ratings with these ratings agencies as well. But we'll take the last 5 questions now.
We stopped here. Lisa, Lenley, Amanda, Ferial, Chris. Now we haven't even been this side, but let's finish here. The shorter and the quicker your questions, the faster we can answer them.
Hi, Lisa from Business Day. So we're at stage 4 now, and I understand at this stage the smelters run as a last line of defense or another line of defense. What happens after that? What happens in the lead up to a national grid collapse? How will we know when we are closer? So just beyond this, up to that worst case scenario. Thanks.
Lynn Lee from the Mail and Guardian. In some of the statements that you've sent out, you've talked about diesel supply being an issue for Eskom, and it hasn't really been discussed here today. My indications from the fuel industry are that supply to the rest of the country is fine. So why is Eskom having these issues? Is it a question of poor planning on Eskom's side, or what's the problem here?
Amanda.
Thank you. Amanda Watson from The Citizen. We've had the 9-point plan, we've got the sustainability task team, we've got the technical review team. Are there any, you say we're going to have feedback in about 14 days, but how many other task teams do we need to know what has been coming for many years now? And the other question is, have there been any signs of sabotage? There's a lot of tube leaks appearing out of the blue all of a sudden.
Ferial.
Ferial Hafaji, Fund 24. Given the fragility of what you've painted for us, what's the percentage risk factor of a national power failure or a national grid failure? And then just a question, don't you think too many cooks spoil the broth? You seem to throw structures at a problem, so there's very many layers that you presented to us. Thank you.
Thanks. Chris? While the mic moves, the Eldrin, I don't know if you're still here, you also raised the question of sabotage. I think the period July, August, when we had the labor situation and strikes and intimidation at power plants, that's when we spoke about sabotage. For the period December, when load shedding happened again, until now, we don't have specific evidence of sabotage. So if I cause confusion, I apologize. Chris?
Chris Yellen from EE Publishers. To Mr. Mabuza, what are you going to do about the threatened strike on the 3rd of April next month? To Minister Gordhan, are you suggesting that there are going to be emergency procurement powers given to Eskom to deal with the cumbersome procurement processes and open tenders? Is Eskom going to be given a bit of leeway to procure by bypassing tender procedures, as well as for hiring new people? We know there's a moratorium on hiring at Eskom. Is Eskom going to be given leeway to hire the right people at the right place at the right time? To Mr. Oberholzer, why are we doing reactive maintenance on boiler tube leaks instead of predictive maintenance, as was done in the past, to sort these problems out before they become leaks, and to do these repairs at a scheduled shutdown instead of on an ad hoc emergency basis? Thank you.
Can the mic please move to Joseph at the back, and then we'll finish with this question in the front here. And squeeze in Vuyo as well.
Joseph Cotterill, Financial Times. If Medupi and Oq'silly have been such massive failures, why not abandon them? why spend another cent on finishing them? Thank you.
Thanks. Vuyo, next to you, behind you.
Vuyo Mvoko, ENCA. There are analysts who believe that whatever it is that you may be doing to turn the situation around, very little really will come of it if you do not relook the current coal supply contracts that you have. Do you agree? And if so, is there anything that you are doing about that?
Thank you. Can the mic please move to the front here? We'll have to close it now with this question. I'm sorry, Pinwal.
Turkmen Terzi from Turkish TR724. Mr. Minister, what step is your government taking to ensure that Eskom procures good quality coal cheaper to lower Eskom cost and guarantee generation? Will there be changes, or will it be business as usual in procurement?
Sorry, can you just repeat your news agency? I couldn't hear.
TR724 Turkish.
Thank you.
Okay, let's distribute this. Mr. Mabuza, Medupi and Kusile, why are you not giving up on them?
Yeah, Minister, we have looked at that in the context of our difficult financial situation. The exercise we did, Minister, was we reached a conclusion that the average return we have on our assets, it's around 21%. And of that 21%, that would then say that the average, there are some assets that are low. We found that Medupi and Oq'silly are sitting on the higher side of the return ratio. So we were looking at that in the context of what assets can we dispose of. So what that would have meant that we had to sell Medupi and Oq'silly only to buy the produced energy from whoever would have bought it. But it turned out that we'd be selling, in terms of return to asset, the most return yielding one of them. We are currently doing an exercise now to look at what would be the effect of not continuing to spend in completing these. That's what we're currently doing an exercise, and when we reached that certain point in our meeting on Thursday, Minister, we decided that should go into what we're looking into the future. But in light of where we're at now, considering that only few of those units have been commercially commissioned, albeit with all the faults that it has, with the option of going to try and dust those that have reached their end of life point and fix them, we are looking at what is it that we can get electricity from for now, and then in the longer term we'd have to go deeper dive into the viability of going in that direction.
Okay, diesel and coal.
Yeah, diesel. I think in all fairness, Eskom has exhausted diesel around South Africa, whether the ships are around Atlantic or Indian Ocean, because of the amount we are buying. We are talking about buying 20 million liters and 25 million liters. As we are talking now, there's no ship that is available. The one that will be coming is Wednesday or Thursday. So what has happened is the refineries have left a certain percentage to the South Africans, but we've exhausted it all. And we have to manage that differently, as it has already been indicated. The diesel issue should be a reserve rather than a daily operations. But this is something we're looking to. Right now, at this moment in time, there's no diesel in South Africa around the ship, except for cars and small utilities that are using coal. Using diesel. That's the first one. With regard to the quality of coal, The quality of coal, we did contribute as Eskom in bringing about the poor quality of coal, the contracts that were signed, the reliance on short-term coal. Let me make an example. About 10 years back, Eskom was producing 70% of the coal on long-term contract and only about 30% in short-term contract. That has since evolved. We're buying 60-65% of the coal on short-term, and long-term is only 35%. So what have we decided to do? We are going to back to a long-term contract. That will be insisted. We have agreed on the deal. Secondly, we're going to spend about 10 billion or so in investing in cost-plus mines, which have been able to produce the kind of quality we need. But thirdly, it has become clear to us that the delivery of coal sometimes from the mine to a power station is not assessed and evaluated on the quality of that. That will be done as we move forward. Just with doing those things, we will be in a better position when it comes to coal. Thanks.
Okay, Jan, you had a question too.
Thank you, Minister. I don't know if you want me to deal with the one of the blackouts first.
Sorry?
The blackout. The concern about the blackout.
No, deal with
the other one.
Deal with the main
the one from Chris Yelland. That is correct. Chris, in the past, we had what we call a boiler health maintenance program. And we had an external company that did that for us. So basically, whenever you have the opportunity, you will send people in and they will go and do the thickness test of boiler tube leaks. They will go and look at erosion, whatever the case may be. That information is then fed into a system. And whenever you plan an outage to do proper maintenance on that specific unit, then you produce a report, and then we know exactly from a preventative point of view what needs to happen. So the question is, what happened to that program? 18 months ago, it was stopped. We're in the process to get it placed. Hopefully we will get it placed this week, hopefully this week. So the question, I think the issue is it's an internal issue. So we cannot blame anybody but ourselves that this contract is not in place.
Yeah, and it's just the quality of coal that we have gathered. It's not that we couldn't stop it. It was just the people that were working on that allowed that kind of coal to come in. Once we have the control systems, that will cease to be an issue.
Okay, then on the labor situation, Mr. Mabuza.
Yeah, Minister, we do take the issue of the threatened strike seriously. We have committed, the Minister did speak earlier about the various engagements, at least at a political level with the unions and labor. We are committed to engage the workers and the unions organizing at Eskom in a sincere and a meaningful way to raise the issues that we have and address the issues that they have raised. We do hope if we can find consensus, there would be no need for that for the strike. So we'll do everything we can in our power to avoid that leading to that. Whilst at it, Minister, maybe let me also address the question of the moratorium on employees that Chris also referred to. Yes, it is a position that Eskom has taken. If you recall, I did indicate that there are those things that routinely we have decided we're going to do. But in the crisis mode that we find ourselves, we would have to look at of those skills that we need that are critical and essential, what is it that we would be able to can procure and source. And my last comment on the diesel supply, it's not so much so poor planning, is we only are allowed to provide for a certain load factor using diesel. We have exceeded that way outside of the acceptable levels. So hence the demand has been much more than what you can't budget for what is not permissible. But in meeting the demand, as part of the efforts, Minister, to try and avoid the total blackout. We do believe that we're still very far from that point. It is these measures that we are putting in place to find time to repair, maintain, so that we can return the producing units back online. But also at the same time, the system operators' main task is to defend and protect the grid to ensure that we don't reach that level.
Okay, and then Chris, you asked about emergency procurement. We have a constitutional obligation to stick within the rules of the Constitution. At the same time, within those rules, we need to recognize points in time like the current one, which require faster processes, but processes that still enjoy the kind of oversight that is necessary to ensure that we don't go into the past mode. So we'll be talking to the Auditor General, the National Treasury, the Procurement Office at the National Treasury to design processes very quickly that will enable Eskom to be more responsive, respond to the kind of urgent requirements that they have, whether it's people, parts, or services or commodities like diesel and coal, and make sure that no malfeasance is allowed during that process. The temptation, of course, will always be for people to take the gap, so to speak, and use these opportunities in the wrong kind of way. We're very aware of that risk, and we'll make sure that it doesn't happen. Two of the colleagues have raised points about you can't throw structures at problems, and one has mentioned the various structures and plans. It's a fair point, but I think human beings, as you all know, are very easily capable of groupthink. All of us spending enough time together will begin to think the same way. And it's very important from time to time to get somebody else to take a look at what the problem is and to give you the feedback. So at a high level, the President's Eskom task team did that in terms of the future structure, the kind of changes in the energy terrain, and some of the operational issues that are problematic at Eskom. The technical task team is more focused on what we told you earlier. What's the energy availability factor? How do we improve it? Why are there so many problems with tube leaks, which is a question you've asked as well? And where are the technical problems for which you require specific types of engineers to actually help us in that particular regard? My favorite analogy here is that every morning, every one of you look at a mirror. Why? Because the mirror gives you feedback about whether you're wearing the right colors, whether the tie is straight, whether something is wrong. Maybe you forgot to put on one or other cosmetic, or whatever the case might be. That applies to men these days as well. So feedback is very important, and the ability to keep an open mind, to allow others to give you feedback and to guide you as well, is going to be a critical factor. But all of that is going to be rounded up fairly shortly, as we told you. Hopefully we can get back to you in the next 10 to 14 days with more conclusive answers to some of these questions. And at the end of the day, we don't want to get into the scenario that some of you have asked about. And we're quite determined that we don't end up there, which is going beyond stage 4. If at all we can help it. If we are getting any closer to that, we'll let you know, in the same spirit as in which we've actually addressed you. So in conclusion, let me repeat what we said at the beginning, that we have a full understanding of the frustration and the disruptions that the current load shedding has caused amongst all constituencies in South Africa. Secondly, we will communicate better and more effectively, more fully, and more transparently, so that, and if any one of you wants a proper technical briefing beyond the few slides that we showed, approach us. We'll make ourselves available so that you understand the system that you either talk about, write about, or ask questions about. Because a well-informed media, as the interlinkage between ourselves and the general public, is an important part of the democratic process in our country as well. And we can assure South Africans that we are doing the best we can under very difficult circumstances to get out of stage 4 permanently if we can, within a short while. But that's a factor we will come back to. The second issue is an appeal to the South African public through yourselves. Help us with demand management. Go back to those good days, even during a bad period when geysers were off and all the things that we did during that time. If all of you can help us that are sitting in this room and outside, that will begin to reduce the 30,000 demand to maybe 28 or 27 and make the situation more manageable from an Eskom point of view. And that is directly linked, giving the space that is required to undertake maintenance. And that we've explained quite a lot of that to you earlier on as well. There is not only a future energy plan, but there's a plan that we are beginning to formulate for the future of Eskom itself. You've heard the President announce the separation into 3 entities. We now have to go into consultation processes at the NEDLAC level and at the unions level and at the level of other stakeholders to ensure that this happens in an organized, systematic and calm way. And what is clear, and what South Africans should be clear about, is that Eskom cannot continue as it is. But the financial situation doesn't allow it to continue in its current form. When you carry a debt of 419 billion rands, something has to give somewhere along the line. And it's time to change the structure and the business model, as the President indicated, make Eskom a lot more viable in terms of its key component parts, generation, transmission and distribution. And we'll tell you more about that as we go on and consult the various constituencies. Lastly, there's a concept called vicious cycle. So we don't want to remain in a vicious cycle where one form of load shedding leads to another set of economic problems, which leads to other problems. We want to shift from a vicious cycle to a virtuous cycle. And we're looking for those opportunities over the next 10 days or so that we can start rebuilding energy supply and rebuilding confidence as well. So we want to thank all of you that are in the room and outside, but before that, looks like the chair wants to say something. Wants to give you free tea or something.
Minister, I don't intend to, when I have the last word. Vuyomvogo asked a question about the coal supply contracts. I just think is not attended to. Can I
did respond now.
He did.
Oh, if it was answered, then I missed it. No, thank you. I was ticking.
I don't know what special relationship you have with Vuyo, but if it hasn't been dealt with,
it was responded.
He can deal with it after that.
Apologies.
So, lastly, again, thank you very much for being here, and we hope to keep in more regular contact with yourselves and the South African public. Thank you.
Thanks.
Thanks, Mr. Thank you.
Okay. You might have questions. You can go and answer it.
Yeah, no, I can sit.
Rwanda told me I do not interview, so.
Just one minute of your time.
I just want to put my
Hello, Peno.
taking and interview. You don't want the minister for the public broadcasting.